Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started. The Omicron surge continues and stories from across the world range from the dangerous to the ridiculous. Some countries are reporting a record number of cases. In China, a woman was trapped in the house of a blind date for 4 days because of a sudden lockdown. In France, a record number of teachers are set to quit their jobs because the government's response to pandemic in schools is not up to the mark, they say. In Brazil, the president says Omicron is a welcome variant. And in India, as daily cases cross the 240,000 mark, political rallies may resume next week. We don't know. A decision will be taken in the next few days. No country has a perfect response, but none beats China. A fourth city has come under lockdown in China. The Wuhan virus poses a real risk to the Beijing Olympics. It's a question of Xi Jinping's prestige now. The government is imposing harsh restrictions. Thousands of people are being bussed into quarantine camps. The images tell the tale of China's desperation. We will bring you the full story. Also on the show tonight, an old dispute is back in focus. India is set to build infrastructure in Lippu Lake. Nepal has protested. We'll bring you the details. Another neighbor is lapsing into old habits. Sri Lanka has decided to seek more Chinese loans as it rules out the option of an IMF bailout. When will Tesla drive into India? Elon Musk says there are challenges in working with the government. Reports say he's using social media to build pressure and seek undue concessions. And America's gun terror remains the most shocking and the most underreported story in the world. One child is shot every hour in the US. We begin as always with Gravitas Global Headlines.
In an exclusive and candid chat with WION, world number 4 and 2021 French Open finalist Stefanos Tsitsipas questions Novak Djokovic's instance of playing by a separate set of rules.
He has been playing by his own rules and has been doing something that not many players had the guts to go and do.
Tsitsipas admits that not many players will put a Grand Slam at risk by landing up in Australia unvaccinated. In a landmark ruling, a German court has sentenced a former Syrian colonel to life in prison for committing crimes against humanity. Anwar Raslan, a senior official under Bashar al-Assad's regime, headed the investigation unit at the notorious Damascus detention center and was involved in 4,000 torture cases. More than 2,000 Russian-led troops begin withdrawing from Kazakhstan after a week-long deployment during the worst bout of unrest in the Central Asian nation's post-Soviet history. Earlier, protests over a hike in car fuel prices turned violent in many big cities. The Biden administration imposes its first sanctions over North Korea's weapons programs. This after a pair of new missile tests were conducted by North Korea last week. These sanctions will target 6 North Koreans, 1 Russian individual and a Russian firm, believed to be procuring goods for these missile programs. The Nigerian government lifts its ban on social media giant Twitter after 7 months, after the company agreed to conditions, including opening a local office. Nigeria had banned Twitter in June last year after the platform deleted a comment by President Muhammadu Buhari, sparking outcry over freedom of expression. The United States witnesses its highest price spike for consumer goods in 40 years, as prices paid by U.S. consumers jumped 7% in December from a year earlier, the highest inflation rate since 1982. Devastation from heavy floods and landslides continue in Brazil's Minas Gerais, killing at least 24 people and displacing around 17,000. Heavy rains have pummeled the region in recent days, putting several municipalities under a state of emergency. An alarming scientific review finds that thawing permafrost could put as much as 50% of Arctic infrastructure at risk of damage by 2050, requiring tens of billions of dollars in maintenance and repairs. South Africa have been set a target of 212 in the Test Series decider against India in Cape Town. Rishabh Pant played a lone hand for India in the second innings, scoring a fourth Test century. He remained unbeaten as India were bowled out for 198. Two-time Grand Slam champion Garbinai Muguruza has suffered a blow to her Australian Open preparations after being knocked out of the Sydney Tennis Classic. The world number 3 suffered a straight sets defeat to Daria Kasatkina in the quarter-finals. In the men's singles draw, Andy Murray progressed to his first tour-level semi-final since 2019, after David Goffin retired in the second set.
Will China cancel the 2022 Winter Olympics, better known as the Genocide Games? It should. The Games should have never gone to China in the first place, but the world showed no spine. All it could offer was half-hearted diplomatic boycotts. Now, China's homemade virus may do what superpowers failed to do: derail the Genocide Games. They're scheduled to begin in 3 weeks from now, and the Wuhan virus is unrelenting. The Omicron variant is spreading fast. It has left China's zero-COVID policy in shreds. One more Chinese city has been put under lockdown, the city of Tianjin in the Hebei province, the fourth city to be locked down in 2 weeks. A handful of cases were reported there on Tuesday. For that, all 14 million residents of Tianjin have been locked up in their homes. This is a bit of a panic reaction. Tianjin is located just 134 kilometers from Beijing, China's capital and the host for the 2022 Winter Olympics. Has Omicron reached Beijing too? It's hard to say, but given its transmissibility, it can only be a matter of time. Let me show you some images from Beijing. These are the venues for the Olympic Games, sealed behind giant metal fences. China has created an impenetrable bubble, or so it hopes. It stretches 200 kilometers across Beijing. For the next 3 weeks, everyone associated with the Winter Olympics will have to stay inside this bubble. From hotel staff to volunteers to translators to cleaners, all of them, they've all been locked up inside this bubble. No one is allowed to leave. You see, this has become a matter of prestige for Beijing. In 2008, when they hosted their first Olympic Games, Xi Jinping was in charge. The event cemented his political position, and then he went on to become the president of China. Now in 2022, he's presiding over another Olympic event, and this one may spell the crash of his geopolitical position. China is seen as global enemy number 1. The truth about the origin of the Wuhan virus is still not out. China refuses to give access or share data. There is no telling what goes behind the Great Firewall. So when China locks up more than 30 million people because of a few hundred cases, the world wonders if it's hiding something more sinister. Let me show you another video. China has set up quarantine camps like these for the infected. They look more like concentration camps, some say. Endless rows of metal boxes with suspected Wuhan virus patients inside. Then we have another video. It shows hundreds of buses carrying people to quarantine camps in China. According to some accounts, if there's one Wuhan virus case in an apartment, all residents of the building are packed into buses and sent to quarantine. Those who refuse to go are treated like this, manhandled by health officials and dragged out of their homes if they do not comply.
站着！老板们，管他！我上个，我电视，我跟你们找的是啊！哎，我自己拿个袋，你给我把口罩戴上来。我钥匙嘛那个，你们把门关了，你把电视关上，你们呢？你哪个来了？
China's crackdown on patients and people is not new. We've seen multiple instances in the last 2 years. But this time, there is more at stake. The reputation of Xi Jinping. The chance to sports wash the genocide in Xinjiang. No wonder China is going to extreme lengths to secure the games. How's the rest of the world faring? Mulling another extreme. They're talking about living with COVID. The cases continue to rise. We'll begin with India. The active case count in India has touched 1.1 million, meaning there are more than 1 million COVID-positive patients in India as we speak. In the last 24 hours, more than 247,000 new cases were reported. That's a 27% jump in one day. What about deaths? 380 in a day. The trajectory does not look good as India readies for elections in 5 states. Prime Minister Modi held a virtual meeting with chief ministers of various states today to discuss ways to contain the surge. In the United States, a new study has established what most experts have been saying. Omicron will cause fewer hospitalizations, it says. This is based on data of 70,000 patients in California. But the findings of the study do not match America's reality. Hospitalization numbers have broken previous records here. This is according to the U.S. Department of Health. More than 140,000 Americans are in hospital. This is the highest since January 2021. It doesn't help that America's top health expert, Dr. Anthony Fauci, says that Omicron is likely to, quote-unquote, infect everybody. He said the risk of severe illness remains low. In neighboring Mexico, there's a sharp surge in cases. At least 44,000 cases were reported this morning. That's a new daily record for this country, 44,000 a day. In Brazil, too, Omicron has become the dominant variant. And the president's statements do not help. Jair Bolsonaro has called Omicron a welcome variant, one that could spell the end of the pandemic. His remarks have triggered some strong responses. The WHO's emergency director has issued a statement. He has said that no virus that kills people is welcome. He's right. Meanwhile, in France, the government is clashing with the education sector. Schools have been shut down. Teachers have hit the streets. Some have even resigned. They're upset with what they call the negligence of health authorities. They say cases are soaring in schools and the government's measures are falling woefully short. Reports say this is the biggest education strike in France in recent history. Trade unions expect 75% of primary school teachers and 62% of secondary school teachers to quit in the days ahead.
It is essentially disdain from the government that we teachers are feeling. A disdain related to a complete denial of the reality. On one hand, we are telling them our demands, calling them for help, telling them what we would want. And on the other hand, the government ignores all of that and tells us that they know what the reality is and that everything is fine, or that things will be sorted out, or that the strategy has just changed and everything will be better. We cannot accept that.
Meanwhile, vaccine makers continue to chase variants. After Pfizer said that their Omicron jab would be ready by March. AstraZeneca has now said that in its early trial data, they found that a third dose helps against Omicron. It apparently generates a higher antibody response. The fact is, this virus has spawned more studies than variants. People are frustrated, disillusioned, and just tired of the constantly changing rules. We've all been there, we relate with you. But then we see what's happening to people in China and we don't feel so bad about our situation. You may have seen the story too. A woman went on a blind date in the city of Zhengzhou. It was a date for a home-cooked dinner. She went to the man's house. Suddenly a lockdown was imposed and she was stuck in his house for 4 days. She posted her ordeal on social media. Now she's trending in China. I'm not sure what to make of this story, but this is what our world looks like right now. We also knew that this pandemic would end political careers. And we knew who the likely candidates were. The ones who downplayed this virus. The first to go was Donald Trump. Next on the list could be his friend across the pond, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson. He's in deep trouble for partying. They say you should never miss a good party, but here's one that should have been missed, the lockdown party. While millions of British citizens were stuck at home, Boris and company were partying in Downing Street. And what's worse, he lied about it to his country, to his parliament and to his party men. Let me introduce two Boris Johnsons to you. The first one is from December 2021. This Boris Johnson says there was no party at Downing Street. The second one is from Wednesday. This Boris Johnson not only accepts that there was a party, he says he even joined in. Listen to this.
I have been repeatedly assured since these allegations emerged that there was no party and that no COVID rules were broken, and that is what I have been repeatedly assured. And when I went into that garden just after 6 on the 20th of May 2020 to thank groups of staff before going back into my office 25 minutes later to continue working, I believed implicitly that this was a work event, and to this House I offer my heartfelt apologies.
A work event, he says, breaking lockdown and lying to Parliament. Prime Ministers have resigned over far less. So the question is, does sorry cut it? According to the opposition, no, it doesn't. They will only settle for one thing, and that is Boris Johnson's resignation, they say.
The party's over, Prime Minister. The only question is, will the British public kick him out, will his party kick him out, or will he do the decent thing and resign?
Will the Prime Minister finally do the decent thing and resign, or will his Tory MPs be forced to show him the door?
So will the Prime Minister, for the good of the country, accept that the party is over and decide to resign?
Two things can happen here. A, the Conservative Party ignores the opposition. They decide to stick with Boris Johnson. Or B, there is a confidence vote, not against the government, but against the Prime Minister. How does that work? All Conservative lawmakers cast their vote. A simple for or against. If Boris Johnson wins, he remains Prime Minister. He cannot be challenged for the next 12 months. If he doesn't win, he must resign. Plus, he cannot take part in the leadership contest that follows. Now, to do this, there must be a party rebellion. At least 15% of Tory MPs must demand a confidence vote. How many Tory MPs are there in Parliament? 360. So 15% would be 54. You need 54 MPs out of 360 to demand a confidence vote. But will they? Will they rebel? Well, they have in the past. The Conservative Party is notorious for abandoning their leaders. First sign of unpopularity and they ditch you. We saw that with Margaret Thatcher in 1990 and then again with Theresa May in 2018. Is Boris Johnson doing any better? Here's how the numbers stack up. 33% Britons feel Labour leader Keir Starmer would make a better Prime Minister. Boris Johnson is at 23%. 66% people say that he should resign. 24% say he should not. As things stand, the Labour Party has a 10-point lead over the Tories. And the numbers could get worse, because the notorious British dailies have smelt blood. Here's the Metro's headline, sorry not sorry. The Mirror just had one word, disgrace. The Daily Star went a step ahead. This is their headline, rules are only for you little people. Clearly everyone is turning on Boris Johnson, the public, the lawmakers, the media. So if he does resign, who replaces him? Most experts are betting on this man, Rishi Sunak. He is the Finance Minister of Britain. In the last 2 years, he has been the public face of pandemic response, announcing relief measures, supporting the NHS. So there is public support for Rishi Sunak. The question is, does he want the job? In the past, Sunak has denied prime ministerial ambitions. But times change, and so do ambitions. This is how Rishi Sunak reacted to Boris Johnson's apology. I'm quoting from what he said. The Prime Minister was right to apologise. I support his request for patience while the inquiry is on. At best, you can call this lukewarm support, and it came a full 8 hours after the storm in Parliament. As for the inquiry he's talking about, everyone knows what it will find. Boris Johnson has himself admitted that there was a party and he's also accepted attending it. So what's left to investigate? The fact is, the Prime Minister's defense is brutal. He says he did not know it was a party. He thought it was a work event. I wonder what gave him the impression. Was it the wine and food? Or perhaps the perfectly set tables? During such tough times, we expect our leaders to lead by example. Why do you think politicians wear masks on television? Why do you think they take vaccines in front of a camera? To lead by example. Boris Johnson has done the opposite. He compared the Wuhan virus to the flu. He reportedly considered letting the virus spread for herd immunity. And he partied in his office after putting his people under lockdown. Apology or not, Boris Johnson's post-party hangover is not going anywhere. For the moment, we'll turn to South Asia. Reports say Nepal is upset with India again. It is protesting the construction of a road in Lipu Lake. A former Prime Minister of Nepal has written a letter calling the construction by India illegal. This comes years after Nepal published a new map wrongly marking the contested Lipu Lake, Limpi Adura and Kalapani areas as Nepali territory. Our next report has more.
The road being talked about is this one. It is called the Yatra route. It is 80 kilometers long. It connects Ghatia Bagar in Uttarakhand to the Lipu Lake Pass located on the China border. For India, this road has strategic, religious and trade importance. Strategic because of its location. Religious because of the Kailash Mansarovar pilgrimage. Kailash Mansarovar is considered the abode of Lord Shiva. It is located at a height of 70,060 feet. Earlier, Indian pilgrims had to travel via China or Nepal. For 80% of their journey, the pilgrims would be in China. And only 20% of the land journey would be in India. This road has reversed that equation. And now it is up for expansion. The road will be widened further towards the Kailash Mansarovar. The announcement was made by Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi at a recent election rally. Nepal has a problem. It says that the road isn't on Indian territory, but the sovereign territory of Nepal. Look at this letter. It is written by former Nepali Prime Minister Jhalanath Khanal. He calls the road illegal. Quick flashback. In 2020, the government of then Prime Minister KP Sharma Oli indulged in a little map fixing. It published a new map, wrongly marking the contested Lipu Lake, Limpi Adura and Kalapani as Nepali territory. India protested. In the months that followed, the ruling party of Nepal split. Soon they lost power. Now the letter that you saw is not by a member of the current ruling party. Jhalanath Khanal is a member of the Communist Party of Nepal, Unified Socialist. It is one of the opposition parties. And back in 2020, when this road to Lipu Lake was inaugurated, the CPN was a part of Nepal's largest communist party. A day after the inauguration, the Communist Party government had issued a statement. It said the road was against the spirit of bilateral understanding between the two neighbors. The demand now is that the Nepalese government should be consulted in the building of this road. But there's a catch. This protest may be at someone else's behest. That someone is China. Can a Nepalese party really act at the behest of China? There is enough reason and history to believe so. Consider 3 instances. 1. China had personally brokered and overseen the merger of Nepal's communist parties in 2018. This was after their alliance won the national elections. 2. Nepal expanded its claim of Lipu Lake, Limpi Adura and Kalapani around the same time that India was caught in a standoff with China in Ladakh. Was it a coincidence? Hardly. 3. In 2020, when Nepal's Communist Party was on the verge of a split, the Chinese envoy to Nepal made public and back-channel efforts to keep the party together. Beijing even sent a top diplomat to keep the party unified. The CCP clearly has strings attached to the Communist Party of Nepal. Which brings us to the question, Should this letter even be seen as a protest from Nepal? Or is it the dragon that's once again seeing red over the development of India's border infrastructure? New Delhi has not yet put out a statement. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
On this show, we've repeatedly talked about the debt trap. It's a Chinese speciality. But how do you define a debt trap? It's basically an endless cycle of loans. You take more loans to repay existing ones, loans on top of loans. That's what we call a debt trap. If it sounds too complicated for you, I've got a solution. Just look at Sri Lanka. That is what a debt trap looks like. Sri Lanka is scheduled to make massive debt payments later this year. We're talking about $4.5 billion, out of which $500 million is due next week. Just one problem. Sri Lanka does not have the foreign reserves to repay. So what does it do? Borrow more from China. I know it sounds absurd. China is the reason why Sri Lanka is in this mess. They've already borrowed $3.5 billion from Beijing, and now they want to borrow more. What do we make of this decision? This geopolitical Stockholm syndrome. Just 2 days back, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi was in Sri Lanka. The Lankan government had just one big demand: please restructure our loans. Basically, change the terms of lending, maybe a lower interest rate or a longer repayment period. And how did China respond? They said they will think about it. Well, China can think all that they want. But here's what we want to know. What is Sri Lanka thinking? They're struggling to repay Chinese loans, and they're asking Beijing for debt relief. And at the same time, they're taking more loans from the very same China. I'm not saying that Sri Lanka does not need foreign assistance. They do, certainly. Without fresh funds, Colombo will likely default on their payments. But the question is, where should those funds come from? Ratings agencies have started downgrading Sri Lanka. Standard & Poor's have changed their outlook from CCC plus to CCC. Fitch and Moody have done the same. They're expecting the forex situation to get worse in Sri Lanka. So why is Colombo going back to China? Because frankly, they do not have many options. When most countries face financial trouble, they turn to the IMF, that's the International Monetary Fund. They negotiate a bailout to keep their economy running. But Sri Lanka does not want to do that. Why? Because the IMF has conditions. Their loans come with conditions. You may have to implement austerity measures or maybe relax government restrictions. Sri Lanka does not want to do that. Here's what their central bank governor said. Our view is the path we are on is the most appropriate. The IMF is not a fix-all solution. It's not a magic wand. There's maybe a possibility of a new loan from China to cushion our debt repayments. We have an understanding that they would assist us. Well, he's right about one thing. The IMF is not a fix-all solution. They're often harsh on countries desperate for money. I can give you an example. Think back to the Asian financial crisis of 1997. The IMF stepped in with a $40 billion loan. But the conditions were severe: lower spending, lower deficits, and a fast track to capitalism. This is what the IMF always offers. So Sri Lanka is right in looking for alternatives. But the question is, was China the best one? They have already taken over one national asset. The Chinese have taken. They've taken the Hambantota port. With more loans comes the risk of losing more assets. Having said that, it's Sri Lanka's call to make. Maybe old habits die hard. Maybe China sweetened the offer with something extra for Lankan leaders. It's happened before, you know. Whatever be the reason, this should be a lesson for the world community. If you do not offer better alternatives, more countries will turn to China for loans, for bailouts, for currency swaps. In other news, Elon Musk has tweeted, and as always, it is controversial. Normally, Elon Musk uses social media to have fun with the share market or drive up Bitcoin rates, but this time he's picking a fight. Elon Musk is targeting India. Our story begins with a random user on the internet. He had a question for Elon Musk. When will Tesla launch in India? Well, a lot of people have been asking that question. When will Tesla launch? In August last year, Indian authorities approved 4 Tesla models. So technically, those cars are road legal in India. Then why is Tesla not selling them? Well, here's what Elon Musk replied. Still working through a lot of challenges with the government. What challenges is he talking about? Import duty. That's the big contention. You see, India imposes 100% duty on imported cars. Elon Musk says this is very high. He says at this rate, nobody would buy his cars in India. It's a fair point. So what does he want from the Indian government? Slash import duty. Make his cars cheaper for the Indian market. That's what he wants. But the government is not on board. Here's what reports quoting government sources say. Tesla is trying to put pressure on the government using social media, and this is not the first time. There are production-linked incentives for the auto sector under which Tesla will get benefits if they produce here. But Tesla apparently is not keen to make in India. All it wants to do is sell with reduced import duties. Let me break that down for you. Tesla wants to bring assembled cars to India, fully equipped and ready to be sold. Such imports have 100% duty in India. But the government is suggesting a CKD method. CKD stands for complete knockdown, CKD. In this case, you don't import assembled cars, you import a collection of parts and you bring those parts to the factory, you assemble them and you're good to go. For CKD, the import duty is 0%. But that's not what Elon Musk wants. He wants a pilot run in India. He wants to see how his cars perform in the Indian market. Only then does he want to start building here, if at all. So you can see why the government is opposed to the idea. The moment you cut import duty, foreign cars become cheaper. And once they become cheaper, domestic production is affected. Just think about it. Why would companies manufacture in India when they could import those same cars at cheap rates from outside? So the government of India is looking after its economy and Elon Musk is looking after his profits. But this is not a straightforward negotiation because Elon Musk is putting external pressure. He's got 70 million followers on Twitter. They hang on to every word that he says. And when Elon Musk says there are challenges in India, some people believe him. And this could sour the negotiations. Remember, this is not about emotions. This is about thousands of jobs, millions of dollars in investments. Such decisions cannot be taken based on Twitter threads. Tesla first demanded tax cuts in July last year. The matter was raised with the Indian Prime Minister. So this decision is being taken at the highest level. All of this back and forth means one thing: delays. Some companies are taking advantage of this delay. Take Mercedes-Benz, for example. They're planning to assemble the electric version of the S-Class in India. It will be the first locally made luxury electric vehicle in India. If Mercedes can do it, why not Tesla? This entire debate really boils down to one thing. Does Elon Musk want to bet on India? And I won't lie to you, it is a risky bet. The EV market is still working through the gears in India. Last year, just 5,000 electric cars were sold. 5,000 of the 2.4 million vehicles sold. And this is the total sales. Luxury EVs were even fewer. Plus, there is a problem of infrastructure. We're talking about things like charging points. India is slowly building up its electric transport system, but Elon Musk is not convinced. Well, fair enough, it is his company, it is his money. But only if he was so cautious elsewhere. In China, Elon Musk has been dumping money. Around half of all Tesla cars produced last month came from Shanghai. All the crackdowns, all the accusations of derailing Chinese satellites, none of it has bothered Elon Musk. As for India, it looks like there will be more roadblocks ahead, more tweets, talks and tariffs before Tesla comes to India. For the moment, we'll turn back to the UK and talk about Prince Andrew. Have you heard of him? He's the second son of Queen Elizabeth, once known as Britain's Playboy Prince. Today, he's a man in disgrace. Prince Andrew has been accused of sexually assaulting a teenager. The case dates back to the year 2001, when the prince was friends with Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein apparently helped him lure a 17-year-old into sex. In 2009, the prince paid $500,000 to the victim to suppress the case. But the allegations have re-emerged. The victim has filed a fresh lawsuit. A New York court has accepted her plea. Our next report tells you what awaits Prince Andrew.
Meet Prince Andrew, the Duke of York, the second son of Queen Elizabeth, the ninth in line for succession to the British throne, and the prime accused in a sexual assault lawsuit. A US judge has ordered a trial into charges that Prince Andrew sexually assaulted a teenager. The case dates back to 2001. The lawsuit was filed by the victim herself, Virginia Giuffre. She is 38 years old now and says she was sexually assaulted at age 17.
He knows what he's done and he can attest to that. So
she's pictured here with Prince Andrew and Jeffrey Epstein's girlfriend Ghislaine Maxwell. It was Maxwell who apparently lured her into having sex with Prince Andrew. She was convicted last week, and now it seems the prince's turn has come. Andrew, who was 40 years old at the time, has consistently denied all allegations. But in 2009, he interestingly agreed to pay the victim $500,000 to drop the charges. In August 2021, when the victim filed a fresh lawsuit, the prince expected this settlement to protect him. A New York judge has now ruled that it doesn't. He has rejected all arguments made by the Duke's lawyers.
Today's ruling was very significant and devastating for Prince Andrew. The Judge Kaplan of the Southern District of New York denied his motion to dismiss. That has implications both in the civil case and potentially with regard to his criminal exposure.
So what happens now? The case will progress to a trial. It could begin any time this year. Documents, emails, text messages, previous statements, everything will be looked at once again. The prince may even have to undergo a sworn deposition by the lawyers of the plaintiff. For this, he will have to fly to New York. But will he?
He would be required to show up. It may be difficult to force him to show up because this is a civil case. However, if he doesn't show up, he defaults. And if he defaults, then a judgment will be lodged against him. There'll be a hearing as to damages, and he'll have no right to appeal that. And so he will suffer severe consequences monetarily.
Sooner or later, the prince will have his day in court. Unlike other royals, he does not enjoy diplomatic immunity. And if he does not turn up, he will incur a default judgment. One that could see him being declared guilty without a trial, win or lose. The details that are expected to come out once the trial begins will be enough to dent the prince's already damaged image. He was once seen as Britain's playboy prince, the favorite son of Queen Elizabeth. But his association with Jeffrey Epstein destroyed his reputation, and that of the British royal family. Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
Our next story is about an army, which is by far the biggest land grabber in the world. Not only does it encroach enemy lands, but also the land of the very country it claims to protect. I'm talking about the Pakistani military. It made a claim on another 8,000 acres of state land. The Islamabad High Court has rejected it. This land was meant for a national park. The army built a golf course on it. This one, the Margala Greens Golf Club. On its website, the Pakistan Army describes it as the finest golf course in Pakistan, a feast of fairways and greens with a layout of breathtaking beauty. No mention whatsoever of how it encroached on this beauty. Let me show you a map. This is where the golf course is located. It's surrounded by a sprawling national park, the Margala Hills National Park. The Islamabad High Court has said that the golf course should have never been built. It says the land was never the Pakistan Army's to use. The verdict was delivered on Wednesday afternoon. The court directed civic officials to seal the golf course and demolish it unless an environmentally friendly use can be found for it. The judgment was humiliating, to say the least. I'm going to quote a few excerpts from what the judge said. A national park is a protected area. There can be no activity in it. No one can even cut grass in the national park area. Every citizen respects the armed forces. If they encroach on state property, then it will not send a good message. It certainly wouldn't. But does the Pakistan Army care? It is a repeat offender. It seems to love land more than its motherland. In January 2016, the Sindh government accused Pakistan Army's Defence Housing Authority of encroaching on 6,000 acres of land in Karachi. A case was filed. The army was asked to vacate the land. A judge who delivered the verdict was quoted as saying that they've encroached so far into the sea that if they had their way, they would build another city on the sea itself. Last year, in April 2021, the Lahore High Court delivered a similar verdict. It said that the army had encroached on several pieces of land in Lahore, one of which, by the way, belonged to the court itself. The judge who delivered the verdict called the army the biggest land grabber in Pakistan. And these are just two instances. There are many more. In a book called Inside Pakistan's Military Economy, defense analyst Aisha Siddiqa says that the Pakistan army owns 12% of the country's land. 2/3 of this land is in the hands of brigadiers and generals, and that there's a clear hierarchy. Officers get real estate. Personnel below the rank of an officer get farmlands. And there is little that anyone can do to stop it. The Pakistan Army is a financial powerhouse. It operates like a conglomerate. It runs at least 50 commercial entities in Pakistan. They range from farms to gas plants to power stations, cement companies, hospitals, universities, pizza chains, poultry farms. You name it, the army owns it. So there's no escaping the powers of this military machine. Forget holding it accountable. These verdicts may make for good headlines, they certainly do, but it's hard to say if anything changes on the ground, because the Pakistan army not only runs the country, it owns it. And here's something that we keep coming back to every other week. Gun terror in the US. It's one of the most serious and perhaps the most underreported stories in the world. We keep revisiting it because other mainstream media ignores it. And we keep revisiting it because America downplays it. They don't even call it gun terror, by the way. They call it gun violence. Every time a school in America is attacked by gun-wielding terrorists, Washington calls the incident a shooting. Not a terror attack, a shooting. Not a case of gun terror. This orchestrated ignorance and inaction has cost lives, American lives. Before I move on with the story, here's a disclaimer. Some of the images that you see, some of the visuals may be sensitive to certain viewers. We seriously advise viewer discretion here. And this is what I want to tell you. One child is shot in the US every hour. I'll repeat that. One child is shot every hour in the United States of America. In 2020, when the world was going in and out of lockdowns, a record number of children were shot in the US. Many managed to survive, many did not. By the end of 2020, 2,200 children were killed in incidents of gun terror. 2,200 children. That's the highest number in 20 years. And these numbers are children. Let me show you some cases to underscore the gravity of this crisis. These sisters were in elementary school. Their father decided to shoot them one night. This is Evans. He was only 8 years old when a stray bullet killed him. He wanted to be a football star. This is Troy. He was 3 years old when he accidentally shot himself. The little boy had dreams of learning how to ride a bicycle. He had recently fallen down and broken his front teeth. These children are not exceptions anymore. They are unfortunately becoming the norm in the US. Innocent children like Troy are shot every day, every hour in the United States of America. Guns killed 11 children in Los Angeles in 2020, 9 in Washington, D.C., 36 in Philadelphia, 59 in Chicago. What is the Biden administration doing about it? Here's the latest headline from America. They'll soon have personalized smart guns, like our smartphones. These smart guns will have fingerprint unlocking. You must have heard about them. These guns have been making headlines. American agencies are going gaga over them. They say these guns will reduce tragedies, like children accidentally killing themselves. Apparently, these guns can only be fired by verified users. How is this even a solution to gun terror, let alone a reason for celebration? First of all, these guns are expensive. A 9mm comes for $895 US. That's more than 66,000 rupees, meaning it's beyond the reach of most people. And secondly, the solution to gun terror is not smart guns. The solution to gun terror is no gun. If you want to reduce gun terror and gun accidents, what you need is gun control. But anything that comes close to the sound of gun control becomes blasphemous in the United States. We've been telling you about this over the years. Gun rights is a part of the US Constitution. The Second Amendment says this. A well-regulated militia, it says, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. These words are 230 years old. They are dated, archaic, and now dangerous. But America's powerful gun lobby and its $64 billion gun industry has kept this country from progressing, from dropping guns. The result is this: children are shot every hour in the US. Let me show you what happened in New York last year. The reason children are being shot, hit by stray bullets, or are accidentally killing themselves is because guns have become extremely common in the US. A gun has become like a toy, a popular accessory, readily available in every nook and corner of every American town. And I say this from first-hand experience. I was in Washington, D.C. last year, and I want to show you what I saw. So I'm at the US Capitol, and to try to understand the scale and magnitude of this problem, the gun culture of America, let's try and take some help from another American export, which is Google. I'll go to Google Maps on my phone, and I will look for gun stores, S-T-O-R-E-S. There you have it. This is the US Capitol. This is the blue dot where we are, and now you'll see all of these red spots. These are all gun stores. These are all places that sell guns. Of the many stores that we saw on the maps, we decided to come to this one. It's called Realco Guns. Very interestingly, this is on the main road. This is a busy road here. And they have this banner. And they have the flag of America right here. And it says gun shop, enter at the rear. So we tried to enter at the rear. And we saw at least 4 to 5 people inside the shop. It was like any other store with lots of guns on display, not toys, the real deal. This is the first time I've seen so many weapons in one place. For sale, with price tags written on them, anywhere from $1,100 and upwards. But they refused to speak to us, and they said it's their policy to not talk to the media. That's what they said. So clearly, gun shop owners on their guard and a little cagey when it comes to talking about their business and how it continues to flourish. I am a journalist.
Okay.
I'm come from India.
Okay.
And we are doing a story on guns in America.
We don't do stories here.
Can I just talk to you for, if you don't like it, you can remove it.
No, that's fine. We don't talk to the media, we don't talk to the press.
Why is that?
Like that. Just because. So, but yeah,
This is the reality of gun terror in the US. It's a whole different world out there. In the United States of America, gun rights are more powerful than human rights. Elections are won by supporting gun lobbies, and children are apparently dispensable. 2,200 children were killed by guns in 2020. Reports say the death toll for 2021 is expected to be worse. We'll wrap the show, leaving you with Gravitas Images. Thanks for watching.
Vu du sol, on ne devait